And welcome to Inclusion by Design. I'm your host, Uma Chatterjee. In a world full of invisible walls and unheard, silenced voices, social inclusion is about making sure that everyone has a seat at the table, not as an act of charity, but as a matter of justice. In this podcast, we dive into what it really means to design inclusion, not as an afterthought, but as a starting point. Each episode, I sit down with social activists, change makers, and professionals from diverse backgrounds who are challenging systems, who are breaking stereotypes, and reimagining belonging. We've talked about how inclusion and equity can be woven into policies, programs, and everyday decisions, and why empathy, intention, and action are the true architects of change. My guest today is Kushi Kushalappa from Enfold, and we are going to unpack what inclusion looks like in practice, not just in theory. Welcome, Kushi. Thank you so much for having me. So I would like you to start with introducing yourself, Kushi, and the organization that you're representing before we get into deeper conversations.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Kushi, and I work in an organization called Enfold, which is based in Bangalore. Enfold has been around since 2001 and works primarily in the area of prevention of child sexual abuse, redressal for children who face sexual abuse, research in the areas of child rights and child participation, and we assist children who have faced sexual violence to take them through the process of reporting, through the medical processes, accessing mental health services, assisting them through the processes of trial, being able to access their entitlements, which are provided in the law, and just focusing more on normalization of the child's life. So that becomes our core area of work.
So you're working with children who have faced sexual abuse, violence, and you're working with their families. Am I going correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So if just working with the child has often proved to be insufficient because the family is sitting with so much more than the child itself is many times. So it's essential to take the family along in the work that we do.
So before we dive into the deeper questions, I wanted to understand if you had an alienation scale, on a scale of 1 to 10, the groups that you work with, how would you rate them on the parameter of being excluded, feeling isolated, alienated? If you had to rate them on an alienation scale, how much would you give and why?
Your question is about how they perceive being alienated or how the system alienates them?
Both.
I'll start with how they perceive to be alienated. I would say that they're closer to 7 or 8 towards being alienated. And in terms of the system I feel pretends to be inclusive, but they do such a shoddy job of it. It's so forced, it's so pretended that I would say they are doing worse than the family. I think they would be at a 9 in terms of excluding and not being able to include genuinely. It's like how companies have to have women in high positions. They do it because it looks good and not because the person deserves to be there many times. It's just something that they end up doing because they're required to have women in high positions or people to have inclusivity in terms of gender. So we see a lot of large companies hiring people, but not because they think they deserve to be in that position, but it looks good, checks the box.
Let's start on a note of transformation. So if you could share a organizational story or a case that you worked with, where you witnessed the transformative power of inclusion. Can you give me a short story or a case study?
So I think this is 2018 when this young person who was then 13 was being sexually abused by her father, and this was the biological father. She didn't want a case to be registered against him because she felt that it would impact the family greatly, and that he was a really good father, and she did love him. She didn't want him to be sent to jail. She didn't want him a police case, etc. But she wanted the abuse to stop. She waited for a period of 3 to 4 months, and then she reached out again to say that she could not continue to live there anymore because things were getting out of hand, and she didn't feel safe there at all. So she wanted to be placed in a hostel. That in our system with mandatory reporting is not possible. So a case was registered. This was 2018. Investigation, all of that kept happening. The trial kept happening. But this girl went into a childcare institution at the age of 13. When she completed her 10th grade, completed her 12th grade, scored really well. And somewhere along her journey, she realized that she wanted to become a lawyer. And this was a child from, I would say, a lower middle class kind of family. So she set her sights on becoming a lawyer because she thought she wanted to help people in her situation. She told us about this dream and this aspiration of wanting to become a lawyer. She completed her 12th grade in 2024, May of 2024. And we were able to get her admission in a college. Actually, credit to her, she filled the forms and did everything. She got admission. We just led her to the college. And we were able to identify a sponsor from Delhi who's paying the entire college fees for the 5 years. They committed to pay college fees for 5 years. And we were able to push the system enough to get her to be part of a scheme that Karnataka has called for the aftercare program called Upkar scheme. So from that we'll get sponsorship so she can be in a paying guest accommodation close to the hostel. This kid has, this young person has so much potential, spunk. What spunk she has. She's a joy. So she's one of our, I can't take pride in what she is, but we're just so happy to have been associated with her for this duration of time. And I see a lot of potential for her in the future.
Yeah, these are small steps towards, which have such large ripple effects. No, one story like this, one step like this towards inclusion, towards breaking isolation, breaking stigmatization. So inspired. Thank you.
I just want to add that in this case, the father was not found guilty. What broke her heart, and I don't know how to say it. So we went to the institution where she was staying at. It was the last day of her 12th grade exam. So she's coming back, and this is the news that we had to give her. And we didn't want to do this on the phone. So we went there and we were telling her that just want to let you know that your father was not found guilty. So she took a couple of minutes to just sort of absorb this and digest this. And then she says, see, I didn't want him to go to jail, but I wanted him to be held guilty just so people believed. Now people will say that you lied about the whole thing. So this is what many times people are sitting with. They're not looking to send someone to jail for 10 years, 20 years, death penalty. That's not what they're looking for, but they at least want to be heard and they want to be believed that their experiences was real. Yeah.
Just to be acknowledged, just that acknowledgement.
Yeah.
That this happened to me.
Because in her case also, the mother refused to believe that she was being sexually abused, and the mother chose to stand by her husband. And the alienation that she experienced from her family, that was devastating. There was one time that I accompanied her to the court, and there were 15 people that had come. It was a large group. The entire family was there. And here there was this tiny little creature. And so we walked her away from the courtroom. So there was me and a couple of my colleagues and then the police people in front, because we didn't want them to come even to approach her to try to coerce her. It was not about intimidating. You can't do anything in a courtroom or in a court complex, but still the sense that there's all of them on that side and I'm alone here as a 13, 14-year-old person, that really breaks the person much more than the sexual violence itself many times.
So true. So this kind of alienation, this kind of the distancing that her mother did also, the other primary caregiver. When you were handling or when you were dealing with her, what is usually the emotional toll it has on the child or the young adult who's going through this kind of a who's gone through the abuse, that is one, but then going through this kind of alienation or stigmatization or shaming or coercion by their own family members, what happens?
Like I just said, I think the response of the family, the neighbors, the community, and society is much worse than the impact of the sexual violence itself, because that happened over a period of time that has stopped now, but this is ongoing. And this is a constant reminder that should I have not spoken about this? Should I have just dealt with this quietly, like so many other people like me have? So should I just have kept quiet and not spoken about this? And my life wouldn't have turned topsy-turvy. My siblings are angry with me for having reported because now it has affected our family financially. There are some people in the community who are like, oh, did this actually happen? So should we isolate this family? The repercussions and the ramifications of coming out and talking about sexual violence, especially sexual violence when the perpetrator is a close family member or a person in a position of power, is it's hard to imagine what all might happen. It's only when it starts happening that a person realizes, oh my God, look at what I've done.
So what does Enfold do to enable this kind of courage to be able to break this silence? So it could have been easier for her. I mean, if I just take this case, just kept quiet, mother also doesn't believe, so just go through it, get a someday move out of the house and take a job or whatever. But she chose to speak out, and then she had Enfold go traveling with her. So even though she was standing all by herself, alienated in the courtroom, like you said, you've traveled with her since she was 30. What enables young people to then come out, break the silence, take on the stigma or take on the shame head on?
One is to know that there is a support system that is not going to judge them and that's never going to doubt them, and let the criminal justice system do what it has to and then decide whether, to find the person guilty or not. To not have a person question them, are you sure this happened? For a person to talk about their experience of sexual violence itself is so difficult. And then to have a single person in that system say, are you sure that, do you think it was like just affection that they were showing? So these kind of questions, I think, are some things that we completely definitely avoid. And what else helps these people is to know that even though they may be isolated from their family, it's not the end of the road. Some point in the future, the family members might actually come around and see that, yeah, what this person shared was actually true. And there is a possibility to actually reintegrate with the family. And that's where the restorative practices team at Enfold also works. There are situations when there has been breakdown in family relationships where with the restorative practices team, we've been able to bridge some of those gaps. I'm not saying it's always successful, but at least there's an attempt to try to get the family and the person some of this relationship to be repaired. Another thing that I think helps young people to come out and report would probably be getting to meet other young people like themselves who are older, who already journeyed this, to speak to them and say that it was really difficult. I know it was really difficult in the first year, the second year, but here I am now. And there are many more people, and us talking about this actually gives courage to many more people to come out and speak about this. And it also puts some amount of fear in a perpetrator that, oh my God, even in this kind of a situation against the father, a person is able to speak. So it does some small ripple, which hopefully one day will have enough strength to make a huge difference.
Yeah, from ripples to waves.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about the barriers or the challenges, I wanted to understand that if you had to identify three very crucial, there may be many barriers and challenges in creating this kind of inclusivity, in enabling this kind of courage. What in your work experience, working with victims of sexual abuse and violence. What are the primary challenges? What are the top 3 challenges?
One, I think there's too much focus on girls, the sexual violence against girls. There's hardly any conversation about sexual violence against children of other genders. The other thing is that the way in which POCSO has been framed, a lot of the cases which are entering the system are of young people in consensual romantic cases or elopement cases. They're also getting stuck in the system. And that's putting such a huge burden on the system that their response to genuine case of sexual violence is still colored, it is getting colored by this whole huge number of cases of not sexual violence which are entering the system. So that's something that probably really needs to be thought of long and hard. The third thing is families and society to be able to talk about sexual violence in a much more comfortable manner. The discomfort around sexuality and anything to do with sexual violence is just allowing this crime to continue like it always has. I don't see a shift in that at all. I see to some extent some systemic shifts, but mindsets, I mean, it's still very difficult to get a family to report a case against a known person. It's still very challenging. POCSO has been around for 13 years, this is the 14th year or something. And still, we are still struggling with convincing a family. There are times when we've taken 6 months to convince the family that a parent, the non-offending parent, that you cannot protect your child beyond a point from a close family member. So, I think society itself needs to take a hard look at themselves and at sexual violence and have the courage to see it for what it is and not make it bigger than it is. Sexual violence on the victim is tough, but when we make it like this, the worst thing ever in the world, it makes it that much more difficult for a person to come out and talk. There are so many experiences which are really disturbing and which can be considered as adverse childhood experiences, and sexual violence is one of them. Why are we making it to be like the worst thing? The death of a parent can be equally devastating or even more devastating. You're never getting that person back. But why are we making sexual violence such a big thing? I'm not saying it's not a big thing.
Yeah, I know.
But
in films and when I was growing up, watching Hindi films, Bollywood films, where a woman who's getting raped or there's an act of sexual violence, and then people saying, "Isse to acha main mari jati." I mean, I would rather die than be raped or become a victim of a sexual violence. I think from that narrative, you've been working in this field for so many years now. Through arts, through media, through films, through music, there has been some, bringing up of this issue of sexual abuse, incest, sexual violence. Has that not contributed to, or how much do you think that has contributed to this narrative shift, if at all?
I think people's expectation of a victim, I use the term victim because that's what is used. They like to see a victim in that sense of a victim. They need to be falling apart. They need to be having like mental health issues. They need to have physical injuries. It needs to be visible. But so much of sexual violence is so insidious that it would be impossible if we lined up a group of 10 people, and would we be able to identify which of them has faced sexual violence or not? Impossible. Just like you can't identify a perpetrator. So in terms of film, I don't know if India is ready for subtle films which talk about sexual violence in a subtle manner without it being over the top. And the manner in which sometimes sexual violence is spoken about in film is very dramatic. Like the courtroom scenes, they're not at all like that in real courtrooms. I mean, what are we trying to say here? Films, I liked, we use the clip from the film Highway, where Alia Bhatt is for the first time actually sitting across and telling her at that whatever social gathering, where she calls her uncle out, her chacha out, and how it is so clear that the mother knew that she was facing this and how she kept quiet. The father somewhat seems like kind of to be in shock. I'm going to give the father the benefit of doubt, but it was brought out quite subtly, and Alia Bhatt did a great role in that. There's an older film called from the I Am series by Onir, I Am Abhimanyu, that brought out how a boy faced sexual abuse. I think that was the mother's partner. So it doesn't need to be blood and gore, and it doesn't need to show a victim in an extreme form. It can be subtle. It can be, because sexual violence is really subtle, and it's not always in your face.
I so resonate with this. I work with survivors of sexual violence and human trafficking. And there was this one girl, one young woman who had once told me that, when you talk about it's not so on your face and sometimes it's so invisible, the scarring is so invisible. And she had actually compared it to a hair in her mouth. She said, it's like a hair in my mouth. Can't see it, I can't see it, I don't know where it is. But Didi, this is so much of distress inside. I feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So it's so true. And I've never forgotten that it is like a hair in the mouth. It's sometimes you will not be able to see it.
Yeah.
And and there's this thing about, this is how victims need to be. This is how victims should be. This is how she or he should behave, or things that he or she should say. I think that's a very, very important point, and I'm glad that you brought this up.
We had a judicial officer one time who was really upset with the young person. I think she was about 14 or 15. She was just being herself, being a young person, and she had a smile on her face. She was just being normal. The judicial officer was upset with her, and she was not portraying victimhood. She's not being a victim. And that struck me as do you even realize that we are trying to get this young person to not be a victim? Why do we want them to remain? Why do we want to identify them as a victim? That's why I was a little uncomfortable using the term victim. But there's no other term.
What would you prefer?
I don't know. I really don't know. Why should we even name them? We wouldn't call a person who's broken their leg or hand as a fractured person. So then why do we call this person as I don't know, would we call them a victim of fracture? Or a victim of parents that divorced? So why should a victim of domestic violence or sexual violence be a victim? Why can't they just be someone who's part of the system, who's here to avail services under the system, or is there because, I don't know.
I agree. I'm just giving my take on this. I think we use the word victim because in the legal sense, a victim has certain rights. So, and I'm not disagreeing with you that I'm sometimes unsure whether it should be used victim, should be used survivors, should be used a person with lived experiences, all of that in that spectrum. But I think in the legal framework, as soon as you say so-and-so is a victim of so-and-so crime, it builds in, okay, so there will be a perpetrator, the state will go after that, this is somebody who needs protection, this is somebody who needs recovery, this is somebody who needs compensation, reparation, there is a charter of rights that this person now has, there are duties and obligations and accountabilities that the system must now take. I know, you're smiling, you're smirking, but the word victim actually is associated
True.
with the rights that this person now has, not only
from the people just immediately around him, her, or them, but it is about the system now becomes accountable to this person because he, she, or they are a victim of a crime.
Yeah.
And I think that's how this word is. The word keeps getting repeatedly used. But I understand the discomfort that you talk about. I want to take on from where you said that this judge often.
Why? I was thinking about this one time when we went into a police station with a boy, young person, just turned 18. He had been sexually abused when he was 13, sexually assaulted by a woman when he was 13. And it was difficult to convince the police that a boy could be raped. And when I brought this up in a training program, I didn't realize that the person was sitting at the end of the far end of the room, the police officer. And she got up, she was so defensive, and she said, "Madam, I did everything. I helped you so much. We registered the case." I said, "Yes, ma'am, but it was difficult for us to convince you that a boy could be raped. To the extent that the mother took the trouble to do a whole bunch of research to show that it was scientifically possible for a boy to be raped." That is our system's response. That came to mind.
So, from as Enfold, what are, if I were to ask you about some of the very proactive and concrete, tangible steps that Enfold takes to dismantle the barriers, stereotypes? You were saying, there are barriers and like prejudices and stereotypes against this is how victims should look, this is how victims should behave, this is how families need to deal with silence and shame. So there are certain preconceived notions that you say that society and many of the systemic players like the judiciary or the police often displays. So what are some of the very tangible or concrete ways in which Enfold tries to dismantle or disrupt these kinds of stereotypes and prejudices against victims?
One is to Enfold works in prevention space. That's one of the largest areas that Enfold works in. To empower young people, and empower is this big word, just for people to be able to recognize sexual violence when it's happening to them, so preventing sexual violence from happening, or then encouraging and empowering a person to speak up when something is happening, and not hold them responsible if they don't speak up either. And also working closely with the system to understand sexual violence for how it is, and helping the system recognizing the gaps and the challenges in the system. So the support and rehabilitation team that works with children who face sexual violence, if we were to take this position that the system is all broken, we won't have lasted as long as we have. And we have to recognize that people working in the system are working with so many limitations. This is not to justify the manner in which the system responds, but we have to recognize that there are flaws in the system, and it's not one person that I can hold accountable to say that, the police are not doing their job, or the medical system is all broken, or the judiciary is broken. They are working with limitations which no one wants to address. If I were to take a child to a police station, the law says the child doesn't need to be brought, so I'm expecting the police officer to come to where the child is comfortable. Then they are going to come in their jeep, because if the police officer were to take a cab, so they come in discreetly, who's going to pay that police officer for a cab? ठीक है, एक बार कर दिया. Then every time to come in an anonymous vehicle to where the child is comfortable. The family is saying, please don't come to my house because everyone will get to know that police came to my house. And the law says you shouldn't be in uniform. Where is the place for a woman police officer to change into civil clothes? So are we expecting them to go back home, change and come back? So in that time, the family is waiting either in the police station or anxiously waiting ki kya ho raha hai. So there are very basic things that we have not considered. The law has said that child should not come to the police station, but what have we done to facilitate that process? And the system is so caught up firefighting, addressing every single situation that's evolving every single moment, that there isn't even time to stop and fix the flaws in the system, the gaps in the system. Are we going to say that, okay, police ko ek hafta chutti de do, let's see how to fix the system? There is no time for that. So I really don't even have an answer how these systemic issues have to be sorted. In a medical facility, a medical officer who's typically, if it's a girl, and the data of POCSO from 2022, 2023, every year has always said that the number of victims is 98% girls and maybe 1 or 2% boys, because the number of cases of children of other genders that enter the system is negligible. I can't even use the term negligible. It's like 1%, 2%. So maximum number of victims, so to speak, are girls. So where do they get taken? To the gynecologist. Why does a gynecologist have to examine a child victim? Any registered medical practitioner can examine them. So where does this girl get taken? To the gynecology department. And you can imagine what a gynecology department in a typical government facility would be like, or in a taluk level medical facility. It is bustling with women in active labor. There's women actually in pain, so therefore there's screaming, there's all kinds of things, there's blood, there's all kinds of things in a typical labor ward. This is where a child is being taken for a medical examination. Now this doctor has to prioritize between this young person or a child who doesn't seem to be in need of immediate medical attention, as against this other person who's in labor or in a high risk pregnancy thing, they're dealing with that. So how is this doctor to prioritize? And here we're thinking that this young girl or this person should not be sitting in a labor ward for such a long period of time. What is the impact of that? The child is like, I don't even need this medical examination because the person touched my breast. The person touched me on my thigh, made me sit on their lap. What is this medical examination going to establish? So all of these thoughts going on in their mind, and the doctor having to prioritize this victim of sexual violence because they've been sitting there for the last 1 hour as against this person who's in a critical situation. So we don't have these specialized, while we do have the one-stop centers, the Sakhi Kendras and those Nirbhaya Kendras which were set up, they're not all functioning the way they should or the way they were envisaged. There's still a lot of gaps because those were established by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. Hospitals come under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. You know how well our systems work together. So there's gaps there. Information regarding this victim doesn't even reach the Sakhi Kendra. So there is a register where one might go and enter a name. And beyond that, there's no other involvement. There's no, there's no convergence between these two units, which can ease the journey. And then in the judicial system, courts are, court complex. You know what a court complex is like. There's all kinds of cases. There's all kinds of people. There's the accused sitting right up across. Their family is sitting right across them. The impact on the victim that's waiting, on the family members that's waiting is hard hitting. A woman who's the mother of a young girl who was then 15. She was a child with intellectual disabilities. The trial was disposed after about 7-8 years. This is one of our earliest cases. And the accused was found guilty at the end of the trial and convicted for a period of 10 years. The mother of the girl was like, I don't know what to feel anymore. This person is the accused, is now married. He has a child, he has a family. And I feel terrible that because of me, that man is going to jail and this mother and this young baby, what am I going to do? when justice takes so long to, by then their interest in seeking justice for their child is also lost somewhere along the way. They're like, let's just get this over with. So that's the judiciary. The system is broken in so many ways. Sometimes I wonder where to begin, but they can be small steps taken. Like I hear in West Bengal, in Calcutta, children are made to come only in the afternoon. So it can be, and even in this broken system, we've had some fantastic police officers who've gone beyond their, beyond what they are expected to do. And we've had excellent medical officers who have been extremely empathetic and have been able to balance just by being their conversations, the manner in which they speak to this person. There have been judicial officers who've been able to understand that, okay, we shouldn't keep this person waiting. We'll tell them to go and come back another day when I can pay attention to them. So system is broken, but then there have been people who've been able to, within the broken system, actually do what needs to be done.
Yeah, there are champions everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's a huge spectrum of work, and to me it sounds like an end-to-end case management, starting from prevention to identification, getting all the services. So Enfold's work is very clear. So organizations like Enfold are looking at end-to-end case management, which, if I were to just be clear and say that if there is no Enfold, Uma, if there are no organizations like Enfold, what happens then to the system taking up, and over here by system I mean the government system, the machinery, the various departments, and you already spoke about a lap of convergence. So what happens there?
So actually the country has on paper, an excellent child protection system. Every district in the country is required to have a district child protection unit that has 11 members, case workers, legal and probation officers, mental health like counselors, an officer. They have a budget. They have like vehicle. So this whole system is there.
So social work and case management is embedded actually in the child protection system.
On paper.
Okay.
Now how, somewhere I'm not sure if NGOs have sort of either made themselves indispensable, or if the system has relied so much on non-governmental organizations that now all of the responsibility of these kind of things are on NGOs. I really don't know where it, like chicken and egg, which came first, and whether the reliance came or the dependence came first. If there was no Enfold, which is in most districts across the country, it's not that there are organizations that are working, especially in child sexual abuse. So things are just chugging along, as they do. But recently, in 2024, the Supreme Court has made it mandatory that every single POCSO case needs to have a support person. So the support and rehabilitation team at Enfold, what we do is we are appointed as support persons by the Child Welfare Committee. Now, with the Supreme Court order saying that every single case needs to have a support person, the system, all districts and all states are looking to empanel support persons. Now, these support persons are again from outside of the system. Why are we relying so heavily on outside of the system? Why are we not making the system functional? That's on the one side. And on the other side, we're saying, no, we should not have NGOs doing this work. There's a pushback about NGOs in the government right now. So it's very conflicting. Like, do you want NGOs or you don't want NGOs? And when you're relying on organizations, then at least there has to be the recognition to forget. But there has to be some sort of financial, monetary thing that allows this person as a support person or an organization that's providing support services to be remunerated in order for this person to be able to function it's a relationship with a child and a family for not 1 month, 2 months. It's a relationship for 2, 3 years, sometimes 5 years. We are in touch with families for the last 12 years. So it's ongoing. I'm not saying that you need to be remunerated for 12 years. I'm saying during the time when those services are being provided, why is that person's time not being respected enough? If you look at the POCSO rules, it says the payment for a support person needs to be equivalent to that of a skilled labor. So a per day thing. Now, if you expect a person to come and provide a per day sort of service, then how is there going to be a relationship with this child and family? So one day I'm going to go, one day you're going to go, one day is third person. Then again, that trust for the child and family is there's no time or there's no space to develop that trust. So it needs to be a mechanism that's actually sustainable and that is owned by a government department or a body. It can't be ad hoc. It can't be saying, you'll empanel support persons, but we have no clarity where the money for these support persons are going to come. Everyone, when it comes to money, everyone washes their hands off. ये department देगा, whether it is the District Legal Services Authority or whether it is the Department of Social Welfare, or is it because children are the responsibility of Women and Child Development, are they going to pay for it? So no one wants to take the responsibility of paying these people, but then every single POCSO case has to have a support person. So there's still a lot of gray area about this, and I don't know, maybe there'll be clarity over the next 2 or 3 years, because we are working with about 5-6 different states where we are training support persons, but we're also trying to help the states set up systems which allow these support persons to function in a sustained manner, where they also have people who can guide them, they also are accountable, they are also monitored and remunerated. So this is a system that we are in the process of working, and it's impossible to bring about change unless we work with the government. We cannot think that NGOs or social sector organizations cannot say that, ye hum kar lenge. We don't have the bandwidth. We have to work with the government. And the government also needs to also come forward a little bit and say, we have to work with them. We have to collaborate.
This interdependence needs to be
recognized and held. Celebrated. Yeah.
From the system to the self, if I were to ask you that in this journey, in this arduous, difficult, as well as some small victories, some small pride and joy, moments of pride and joy, was there a time where you had to confront any internal biases or assumptions that you had towards victims of sexual violence or sexual abuse?
So now we'll talk about something that we haven't spoken at all: young people getting pregnant. So we are contacted by either people within the child protection system or from the medical system saying that here is a person who's 28, 30, 32 weeks pregnant and wants to terminate their pregnancy. Do we sit in judgment that we are going to facilitate a termination at a very advanced stage, and then what is the right of this fetus as against this person who has been sexually assaulted by a close family member, by a brother, a cousin, whatever, or just extremely traumatized from their experience with sexual violence and wants to terminate this pregnancy? We do approach the lawyers, because beyond 24 weeks, you can't terminate a pregnancy without a court order. So when we approach the lawyer is like, I don't know whether I want to do this. I do want to do right by the person, the victim of sexual violence. But then at 32 weeks pregnancy, sometimes what happens is that this infant, the fetus, is born alive and stays alive for about a week, 10 days, kept at NICU, and then it passes on, or sometimes they may survive. So this is a bit conflicting. There are doctors who say, I cannot perform a termination, I'm pregnant myself at 32 weeks, 33 weeks. So this is one area. And the other area is also conflicting, where sometimes personally, when the person who's caused the harm, the person who's committing the sexual violence is themselves a young person, 13, 14, 15 years of age. I mean, do we want them to be considered, they are considered children who have committed a crime, children in conflict with the law. They're alleged offenders, but we know what the system for young people is. And what made this person become someone who perpetuated sexual violence on a child? Their own experiences. No one has ever gone into that. They're just now a person who's committed a sexual crime. That's it. So these are a couple of places where there's, I'm sure, many more, but these are the two that come to mind right away.
Yeah. Okay. Couple of lines you will need to complete for it. Okay. This is a social inclusion podcast. So,
Right.
Social inclusion feels like
Where we shouldn't be having to have podcasts to talk about it. It should be part of our day-to-day life. And social inclusion feels like a person not feeling needed to be included. They are part of this ecosystem. No one is looking at them to be from a certain gender or a certain age even, or a certain caste, or a victim of a certain crime. They shouldn't ever have to feel that way.
the biggest misconception about stigma is
The biggest misconception about stigma is that I'm alone in this.
Kushi, I'm so glad that I'm having this conversation with you, because you've talked about the power of coming together to fight alienation, stigmatization, the power of small acts, small design changes, small intentionally committed processes, systems, policies that can shift this, that can shift narratives of exclusion to inclusion, that can probably change the endings of many stories that so many of the survivors that you spoke about built for themselves, carry with themselves. So thank you very much for a part of Inclusion by Design.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
And that's it for today's episode. Thank you for listening to Inclusion by Design. Remember, inclusion and equity aren't just lofty ideals. It's a design choice, ones that are deliberate, human-centered, and driven by the belief that everyone deserves to belong. We hope this conversation sparked something for you. Inclusion in action until the next conversation.